I hadn't seen Roland in over a decade. We were the kind of friends that only existed in a certain chapter of life, the blurry mess of sophomore year through graduation, and then slipped apart without any official goodbye. He was always kind of a mystery, even back then. Quiet, intense, with eyes that studied people a bit too long. It wasn't until I was halfway across the Arizona desert, heading home from a teaching conference in Flagstaff, that I saw his name pop up under a picture I posted. Just a cactus sunset with some dorky caption. His comment was simple. "You in Arizona? I'm about 90 minutes southeast of there. Stop by." I didn't even hesitate. Something about the idea felt right. Familiar. I messaged him back, got his address, and pointed my old Chevy toward the tiny blip on the map called Granite Hollow. Population, probably just him and his mailbox. The place looked like a time warp. His house sat crooked at the end of a gravel lane, the kind of house with a face, windows like eyes, porch like a sneering mouth. It wasn't run down, but it had that warped, forgotten vibe. Paint bleached out from the sun. Porch planks bowed like old men's backs. The smell when he opened the door hit me like a memory. Dried herbs, dust, and something metallic under it all, like wet coins in an old purse. He looked older, sure, but not by much. Thinner, grayer, but those eyes were the same. Too quiet, too still. He grinned, gave me a handshake that turned into a quick hug, and said, "Didn't think you'd actually come." His voice hadn't changed either. Still slow, like he was measuring every word before it left his mouth. The inside of the house was darker than I expected. The furniture had that mid-century museum look, like it had been preserved under glass since 1968. Thick rugs on wooden floors that creaked under every step, lamps with yellowed shades, walls lined with dusty books and framed maps of places that no longer existed. We drank from old glass tumblers, some bourbon he'd poured without asking, and sat in a low-lit room swapping pieces of our lives like baseball cards. It felt easy, even when it shouldn't have, like slipping back into an old coat that somehow still fit. By the third drink, I felt that sleepy warmth creeping over me. He was refilling our glasses when he said, "You're not going to drive back to wherever tonight, are you?" I blinked at him, and he added, "Spare room's made up. You'd be safer here than falling asleep behind the wheel." He wasn't wrong. "Long as you're sure," I said. "Wouldn't offer if I wasn't." The room was down a narrow hall with a low ceiling. There were picture frames on the walls, old black and white shots of people I didn't recognize, all unsmiling, all staring straight at the camera like they were afraid to blink. The room he gave me was cold, not like freezing, more like forgotten, airless, like whatever was supposed to live in it had moved out years ago and left something else behind. I dropped onto the bed without pulling the covers back. I barely noticed the details, just the wooden dresser, the sagging curtain, and the pale square of moonlight stretching across the floor. I passed out with my shoes still on. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up choking on dry air. My throat felt like sandpaper and the room swam in darkness, the kind that makes you forget you have eyes. I sat up, swallowing down the nausea, and that's when I saw it. There was something in the corner. At first I thought it was just a coat hung on the closet door, a long black thing, heavy-looking. But the more I stared, the less it looked like clothing. It had weight, mass, presence. The top part bulged unnaturally, like it had shoulders too wide for the body it wore, and it leaned slightly forward, as if it had been caught in the act of moving. I blinked hard. Maybe I'd seen it earlier and just not remembered. Maybe the bourbon was still messing with my head. I lay back down, turned away, but that prickle between my shoulder blades stayed sharp and icy. I peeked again. Still there. This time I pulled the blanket over my face and tried to count my breaths, like I used to when my dad yelled too loud and I had to make the world smaller to stay sane. Eventually I passed out again. Or blacked out. I don't know. What woke me next wasn't thirst. It was sound. A sound I will never forget. The soft, deliberate groan of wood giving under weight. One step at a time. I snapped upright. Light was just beginning to bleed through the curtain. Not full daylight, just enough to gray the edges of the world. And the corner was empty. I didn't think, I just moved. Shoes half off, breath caught in my chest. I stumbled down the hallway like a man trying to outrun his own shadow. Roland's door was closed. I pushed it open and shook him until he mumbled something and sat up, bleary-eyed. "There was someone in that room," I whispered. "Or something." He blinked at me. "What are you talking about?" "The coat," I said, "hanging on the door, big, black. It wasn't there when I fell asleep. But then it was. Then it wasn't." He frowned, really looking at me now. "I don't own any black coats," he said, "especially not long ones. I haven't even used that room in years." "You sure?" "As sure as I am that you look like you've seen a ghost." We went back. Together. The floor creaked under our weight in all the wrong places. The closet door was closed. The corner was just a corner again. I told him everything. The sound, the shape, the way it watched me. He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He just stood there rubbing his arms like the room had gone colder. Eventually he said, "We should check the house." So we did. Every room, every closet, even the cellar, which was the kind of place horror stories breed in. Low ceiling, dirt floor, old boxes stacked like coffins. Nothing, not a shoe, not a footprint, not a single damn trench coat. When I finally packed up and left, Roland didn't try to convince me I imagined it. He didn't try to explain it away. All he said, standing on his porch with the sun behind him, was, "I don't think you were alone in there." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. But now, nights like this, when I can't sleep and the house is too quiet, I still see that shape. Not in the corner anymore. Not far away. Closer. Every time. Like whatever it was followed me home. When I was 19, the world still felt like a giant novel. Unread, thrilling, and full of chapters I thought I'd be the hero in. That summer I took a road trip with my parents and my best friend, who we'll call Marley. She wasn't just a friend. She was more like that character you know will either save your life or drag you straight into the fire. Either way, you'd follow them without blinking. It was July of 1996. Long before smartphones and Google Maps, when getting lost was part of the adventure, and finding a place to sleep meant flipping through dusty brochures or trusting your gut. We were carving our way through the Danish countryside, past wind-twisted trees and narrow cobblestone towns where old folks still waved at passing cars. Our plan was simple. 8 hours from home to a giant amusement park near Aalborg, followed by camping somewhere under the stars. But we hadn't booked a campsite. That was my dad's idea of fun. Freestyle life. He called it letting fate take the wheel. My mum went along with it because she loved him, and I went along with it because, well, I was still young enough to think nothing bad ever really happens on family trips. We reached the city just as twilight painted everything with that weird golden filter that makes even cracked sidewalks look like poetry. The plan was to hit the park the next morning, so all we needed was a place to pitch our tents and rest our bones. Dad found a campsite on a dusty travel guidebook page called The Number and frowned. Full. Some big football camp took up the whole thing. He made a dozen more calls from a phone booth while we waited in the van, chewing gum and listening to the radio fuzz in and out. Every place was booked solid. Summer rush, last-minute chaos. Eventually he sighed and said, "We'll go natural. Find a clearing in the woods, just like the old days. I should have known then." When adults say just like the old days, it's usually code for something unsettling is about to happen. We drove north, deeper into the forest, where the paved roads gave way to loose gravel and damp earth. Somewhere near a nature preserve, we pulled into a forgotten parking lot. Just a patch of cracked stone surrounded by thick pine trees that swayed like they were whispering secrets. There was no gate, no signs, just nature. Untamed, humming with that kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but watchful. There was another car parked there, off to the side, a rust-colored Volvo with one missing headlight and a cracked windshield. It looked abandoned. Not recently either, like someone had once fled it and never came back. We stepped out into the scent of moss and wet bark. A woman walked past, wearing hiking boots and carrying a thermos. She looked at us curiously, then smiled. "This place is good," she said, nodding toward the trees. No patrols, just owls and silence. We thanked her, and that was that. My parents set up their tent near the van. Marley and I picked a soft patch closer to the trees, figuring we'd get the better breeze. She was all about comfort, pillows, candy bars, a Walkman with extra batteries. I helped her arrange everything inside until it looked like the kind of tent you'd see in a catalog. Then we huddled in, snacked on trail mix, and passed the time making up stories about forest spirits and woodland monsters that lured campers to their deaths. You know, normal teenage stuff. It was after midnight when we finally decided to wind down. The sky had gone pitch black, no moon, no stars, just layers and layers of tree canopies above us. My parents were already asleep. Marley and I scrolled through her little stash of cassette tapes, playing whatever didn't sound too scratchy. Then came the noise. A clunk, sharp, metallic, right outside the lot, like someone had dropped a shovel onto gravel. We both froze. She looked at me with eyes that had turned completely serious in an instant. "You heard that, right?" "Yeah." We didn't move, didn't unzip the tent, just listened. Another sound. Thunk. This one more muted. Then came the slam of a car trunk. It came from the direction of that rusty old Volvo. A minute later, tires squealed against gravel. The car peeled out of the lot like a ghost running from something even scarier than itself. I pulled out my old Nokia and texted my cousin Eric, who lived not far from the area. He replied within seconds, "You're camping near Black Pine Preserve. You shouldn't be there. That beach nearby. People disappear from there. Gangs, smugglers, weird stuff. Stay safe." My stomach coiled. I stared at the screen, rereading his message while my fingers went cold. 10 minutes passed. Quiet again. A false sense of calm settled in. Marley was hugging her knees when it happened. A scream. From deep inside the woods, male, long, twisted by something more than fear. It was agony, my whole body locked up. It was the kind of scream you don't just hear. You feel it down in your spine like it wants to crawl under your skin and live there. I texted my mom. "Did you hear that scream?" No reply. So I called her. Her voice was sleepy, calm. "Honey, we didn't hear anything," she said. "Probably a fox or something." No way. Marley and I sat there gripping each other like our lives depended on it. The woods were silent now, but wrong silent. The kind of silence that isn't waiting. It's watching. Then, footsteps, soft, slow, circling our tent. I killed the phone light and held my breath. Marley squeezed my arm. I could hear my pulse in my ears, thudding like a drum solo. The steps moved past us, toward my parents' tent, then around the van. Crunch, pause, crunch. I didn't breathe until they stopped. That's when headlights swept over the trees. A car, the same one. It returned. We dropped flat, hiding in the shadows of our sleeping bags. I peeked out through the corner flap. The door slammed shut. The car spun its tires and disappeared again. But 5 minutes later, another vehicle showed up. This one fast, sirens off, lights flashing blue and white. A police cruiser. It chased the direction the other car had gone, but they never came back. We didn't sleep. We climbed into the van, locked the doors, and sat like that until dawn. I stayed awake, watching the tree line like it might open up and spit something out at us. Marley eventually dozed off. I didn't close my eyes until I saw sunlight creeping up the trunks of the trees. We told my parents everything over lukewarm instant coffee. My mom looked pale and tight-lipped. She admitted she'd heard the footsteps too, said she'd also heard breathing, not normal breathing, heavy, like someone standing right next to their tent, listening, waiting. Dad had slept through the whole thing. We packed in record time. Nobody said it, but we all felt it. Like we'd come close to something terrible. Something that hadn't quite decided if it wanted us or not. The amusement park felt like a dream we weren't part of. Cotton candy, roller coasters, screaming children. I kept seeing trees in the distance and flinching. Marley clung to me the entire day, like she wasn't sure she'd ever let go again. That night, back in the hotel, I found an old article in an archived newspaper site. Man found dead in Black Pine Preserve, multiple stab wounds, tied to local gang conflicts. 2 other men reported missing near coastal trails. Investigation ongoing. I read it twice, then a third time. I still wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed on the beach instead. If we'd slept soundly. If we hadn't heard the scream. Who was that man? And more importantly, who or what was listening so closely outside our tent? I guess some stories aren't meant to have endings. Some just keep walking in circles around your memories, waiting for the tent flap to open. I was 8 when it happened, the kind of age where your memories start to stitch themselves together like worn quilt patches. You remember smells more vividly than conversations. You remember feelings more than facts. And I remember that night like a fever dream that never quite broke. My name's Simon. I had a little sister named Eliza, 2 years younger than me, wiry little thing with huge eyes and a stubborn streak. We grew up in a narrow, creaky house on the edge of a washed-out New Hampshire town that felt more like the ghost of someplace bigger. Our house sat crooked on its foundation, the way a book sits when the spine starts to go. Our parents slept downstairs in the converted study. Eliza and I shared the attic room, once an unfinished space, now split by a curtain and a coat of paint. It was late, well past the time when the house went quiet. We weren't allowed to be up past 9. Dad was strict in that distant Cold War way, more bark than bite, but still, you didn't push him unless you wanted a lecture that lasted longer than church. I don't remember if it was summer or fall, but it was one of those nights where the air in the attic got so still it felt like you could cut it with scissors. No wind, no owls, not even the buzz of mosquitoes. That's when I heard it, not a bang, not a creak, a voice. It was quiet, soft, almost like it was trying not to be heard, which made it all the more eerie. "Simon, Eliza," it whispered, like someone trying to coax a kitten out from under a bed. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then I felt a tug at my sleeve. "Eliza." She was wide-eyed, her voice barely a breath. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. "It's Mom," she said. "She's calling us." Now I'd heard our mom call us 1,000 times, but this was different, too smooth, too rehearsed, like someone doing an impression of her. I sat up, heart thumping. The whisper came again. "Eliza." "Simon, come downstairs." I remember the look on Eliza's face, part hope, part dread. "We should go." I shook my head. "That's not her." She frowned, confused and annoyed. "Of course it is. Who else would it be?" But there was something in my gut. That lizard part of your brain that knows when something's off. I motioned for her to stay put and crept toward the attic stairs, where the door at the bottom led to the hallway near the kitchen. I stood at the top step, staring down, holding my breath. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Simon, Eliza, I made cocoa." That did it. My stomach twisted. Mom never made cocoa at night. She was a tea person. Always had been. I turned back toward Eliza, whispering sharply, "It's not her." She opened her mouth to argue, but then the attic door rattled, just a little, like someone had touched it gently. I could see the handle quiver in the dim light. And then, from the other side, "Sweethearts, open up." It sounded like her voice, but there was something wrong with the way it curled around the words. Too sweet, like syrup poured on something rotten. My legs went ice cold. We ran. Back to our beds, we slammed the curtains shut and hid under our blankets like that thin layer of cloth would save us. Eliza started crying, but I pressed my hand over her mouth. "We scream on 3, I whispered. 1, 2, 3. We screamed like hell, Loud, raw-throated, desperate screams, and we stomped too, slamming our feet into the attic floor until it sounded like thunder. For a few horrible seconds, nothing happened. Then footsteps. Heavy. Rushing. Dad's voice roared from below. "What the hell's going on?" He pounded up the stairs. The door was still locked. We'd bolted it from inside. When we finally opened it, both our parents looked bleary-eyed and angry. But when they saw us, saw Eliza's tear-soaked face, saw my shaking hands, their expressions changed. "What happened?" Mom asked, kneeling beside us. We told her everything. Every whisper, every word, every sound. She paled. I didn't come upstairs. I didn't say anything. We told her about the voice, that it knew our names, that it offered us cocoa. And Dad, he didn't speak. He just turned and stormed down the stairs, baseball bat in hand. Mom stayed with us, holding us tight like we were made of glass. I remember her breathing changed, not panicked but sharp, focused, like she was listening for something. Then came the doorbell. 3 chimes, not rushed, not frantic, just 3 little chimes that echoed through the house. Mom stood slowly. "Stay here. Lock the door." We did. We crept to the attic window and peeked through the old lace curtain. Down below, in the bluish porch light, we saw the police cruiser. A uniformed man stepped out and approached the door. We didn't see what happened after that, only that Mum spoke to him for a long time. Dad joined her. We watched, breath held, hearts pounding. Eventually the cruiser left. They never told us what was said. When we begged them later, they shrugged. Just some weirdo. A prowler maybe. Got the wrong house. But I never believed that. Because prowlers don't whisper your name in your mother's voice. They don't ask you to come downstairs like a parent calling you for bedtime cocoa. They don't know which door creaks, or how to make their voice sound almost but not quite like someone you love. Years later, over dinner, long after we'd moved, long after Eliza and I had grown out of childhood, I asked again, and once again they gave me the same answer. "We don't know. You were lucky, that's all." But there was a pause, just a flicker of hesitation. I saw Mom and Dad exchange a look. Tight-lipped, quiet, like a secret passed under the table. They knew, and they weren't telling. That's what keeps me up sometimes. That echo in my mind, "Sweethearts, come downstairs." I made cocoa, because that thing, whoever or whatever it was, stood at the bottom of our stairs and wore my mother's voice like a mask. And if we'd opened the door, if we'd gone down those stairs, I don't think I'd be here to tell you this story. I was 16 when it happened, back when landlines still worked better than cell service in small towns, and kids rode their bikes more than they scrolled. We lived in a tight-knit place called Elmbrook, somewhere just south of nowhere, where every streetlight flickered like it held a secret, and every cracked sidewalk told you to watch your step. It was early spring, still cool enough for hoodies and breath you could see, and I was headed to my friend Wren's house for the evening. She was throwing a low-key get-together, just some of the girls from school, nothing wild. Wren lived barely 15 minutes away by foot, tucked in a quieter part of town near the old railway tracks and behind the library where no one ever went anymore. My mom dropped me off just before dusk, but with her new mystery man taking her to some jazz bar across town, I knew I'd be walking back. It wasn't a big deal. Elmbrook wasn't exactly dangerous, just the kind of place where everyone minded their own business, even if something strange was going on right next door. There were 5 of us. Me, Wren, Jocelyn, Talia, and Lila. We sat out back under a string of dusty fairy lights, passing around cherry sodas and swapping gossip, while the last bit of daylight bled out of the sky. Then, like the sudden screech of a violin string in a horror movie, the energy changed. Wren casually mentioned that a few guys might swing by, and I didn't think much of it, until I saw him walk in. His name was Felix. Now, Felix and I had history. Not the sweet, nostalgic kind, the kind that simmers under your skin and makes you want to be anywhere but in the same zip code as him. Wren, in her infinite optimism, figured we needed to talk it out, fix whatever drama lingered like a bad smell. But I hadn't come to play therapist. The moment I saw that smug little half smile of his, I knew I was done. So I left. No drama, just a, "Hey, gotta go," and I slipped out through the side gate like a ghost. The air was colder than before, and the streetlights hadn't fully kicked in yet. I tugged my hoodie tight, popped in one earbud, just one because I'm not completely stupid, and started walking. About 5 minutes in, I felt it. You know when someone's watching you, not looking at you, watching you, there's a weight to it, a shadow that crawls up your spine even when you're not sure why. I slowed, listened. The crunch of gravel echoed behind me, once, twice, too steady to be random. I turned. There he was. A man, probably in his 40s, wearing a dark sweatshirt with the hood up and both hands buried in the front pocket. His eyes were too wide, his smile too eager. "Evening," he said, like we were neighbors bumping into each other at the grocery store. "Hey," I mumbled, turning back and speeding up just enough to say I'm not interested, but not enough to make it obvious I was scared. It was still a residential street, and I wasn't far from home. But he stayed behind me, matching my pace. Never gaining, never falling behind. Just there. I took a few turns, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see if he'd follow. He did. Every corner, every crossing. He trailed me like a shadow that wouldn't detach. I started texting my friends rapid fire. Ren, Lila even, God help me, Felix. I didn't care who came to get me at that point, as long as it was someone. Meanwhile, the man piped up again. "Nice night, huh?" he said. His voice was casual, like this was a date, like I was supposed to giggle and agree. "Yeah," I said, shorter this time. My jaw was so tight it hurt. "You from around here?" "No," he laughed. "Oh, I think you are. Don't you live near the school?" That stopped me cold. My heart dropped into my stomach like a stone tossed into a well. I spun around. He was still smiling, but it had changed. Less friendly, more knowing, like a wolf playing dress-up as a man. "Leave me alone," I said. It came out shaky, but loud. Then I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in gym class, screaming the whole way. Not the kind of scream you use in haunted houses for fun. This was primal, loud, real. The kind of sound that tears your throat open. I heard him coming behind me, footsteps pounding on pavement. But he must have realized what my screaming would bring, because then I heard him bark. "Shut up, you little—" He didn't get to finish. Porch lights blinked on. Curtains twitched. A door creaked open somewhere, and then he vanished. I collapsed near a house 2 blocks from mine. An older couple came out. The woman wrapped in a pink robe. The man holding a baseball bat that looked like it hadn't seen action since Nixon was president. I barely got the words out. He tried to grab me. He followed me. He knew where I lived. A minute later, Felix pulled up in his rusty old car, looking like he'd been summoned by fate. I didn't even care anymore. I threw myself into the passenger seat and he drove me home. He even offered to stay the night when I told him what happened. I said yes, not because I trusted him, but because I didn't want to be alone. We stayed up in my room, not talking about what had happened, but circling around it like 2 kids tiptoeing near a frozen lake. Then we heard it. Footsteps, outside, circling the house. Felix froze. I crept to the window. My room faced the backyard, and we both heard the creak of the gate. That gate never opened. Not unless my mom forgot her key. Then a voice. "I see you up there." That was all it said. But it felt like a knife under the skin. I stumbled back. Felix yelled, "We're calling the cops, freak!" And we did. Cops came, took a statement, patted my shoulder like they were telling me everything was fine, even though we all knew it wasn't. The man had known where I lived. Maybe he saw me get dropped off at Ren's. Maybe he'd been watching longer than I realized. My mum came home an hour later, pale and shaken. She cried. She held me too tight. She told me she was sorry, over and over, but what was there to be sorry for? The next day, Uncle Dennis came over and installed cameras. Big, obvious ones, red lights blinking like little sentinels. For a few months, a police cruiser would roll by our block at night, just in case. And a year later, we sold the house. Not because of the market, not because we needed the money, but because every window felt like an open eye and every creak of the floorboards made me flinch. I never saw that man again. But sometimes I wonder, did he ever stop watching? Or did he just find someone else to follow home?